Hello everyone and welcome back to Around the Farm. Today we're going to take an episode off of building stuff to talk a little bit about the Magneto on my tractor. My tractor is a 1941 John Deere B and it has a Wico Model X distributor, or Magneto, sorry. The actual specified model number is an XH-1042, but they are commonly referred to as a Model X. And so what we're going to be talking about today is basically how the inside of it works and what my problems have been with it. And so as you can see here, there's these little pawls in here, and what those do is they catch on this deal right here, and when they catch, it causes the distributor to, or the Magneto to bind up, and then the spring releases it. That snap is what makes the spark. And so the problem I had was, I believe anyways, my Magneto wasn't sparking consistently. In fact, there'd be times when I could turn it 20, 30 times and it wouldn't spark. And I discovered that because I was trying to retime it, and you have to take this cap here and put a piece of wire in there and just touch it up or make it real close to the Magneto, and that should spark when it's sparking on the number one plug wire. And so the problem I think I was having was the nut came loose. This cup sits on here, and there's a few other parts that go underneath it, but the nut came loose, and I think it came loose enough that it unwound the spring just like half a turn. And so I took it all apart, and I couldn't figure out anything that was wrong with it, and I put it back together, and the spring, before it was broke, fits into the inside of this cup. This goes in there, and then the spring winds up, and it fits in the inside of this cup. And basically, it's like a recoil spring on like a pull start rope on a lawnmower or something like that. Anyways, I wound up the spring, got it inside the cup, and I just put this on there and tightened it down, and I wasn't getting it to snap at all. Those of you that are familiar with these Magnetos know that anytime the deal is trip, it makes that distinct snapping noise. And so anyways, I couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. I took it apart a couple times, put it back together, and I just couldn't see anything that was wrong with it. And so what I ended up doing was going online and just looking at forums and stuff like that, and I found the service manual for these Magnetos. And what the service manual says is, once you get it together, you have to wind it a full turn before you tighten it down, and that's what preloads the spring for the powels there. And so basically that's the step that I had missed. And then so what I did was I wound it, and I got it all back together, and I could not turn it by hand. It just was way too difficult to turn it by hand, and you're supposed to be able to rotate that over by hand. And so I put it on the tractor. I didn't worry about timing or anything like that, but I just put it on the tractor, and I turned the tractor over, and it snapped every time just like it should. So I knew my problem was fixed, but basically what I figured is I had tightened it half a turn too tight. And so I went to take it apart to take that extra half a turn out of there, and when I did, the spring came popping out of there, and when the spring came popping out, it broke. And so I've got another spring on the way, and we'll get that spring in there, but then we can get this all back together, and hopefully I can get my tractor fixed. But now that I look at it, I probably should have replaced this plate too, because it's actually worn in there pretty good. But there's supposed to be behind here, there's supposed to be an oil slinger that is supposed to distribute oil around inside of here, but I can't tell that it is at all. And I guess it has been quite a while since this thing has run, but anyways, so the pawls are on there. They do have little snap rings that hold them on. I never did take them off because there was no reason to. But there's a spacer that goes right there. And then this cover, everything has got a flat part in the shaft. And so the cover goes on just like that. And then there's a spacer here. And that spacer is important because otherwise things get too tight. And I believe it's possible that you may need to take a spacer out or add a spacer depending on what's going on. Now the next part, this can be a little tricky, but these two washers go on here, and as you can see, they've got that notch in them, and that notch actually fits the other part of the spring like that. And so when that spring is all wound up in there, it locks into that notch and it locks into the cup. So these go on, same way as everything else. They've got that flat side on the shaft, and then the spring would be wound up in here, and then you get the spring lined up so it pops into there, and then from there you have to wind it a full turn. And that can be a little bit difficult because those powels like to fling out like that, and then it catches on there, and it can be difficult. And so that's what I have to do to fix it, is I have to get a new spring, and then I have to get everything wound right. And so I've got a new spring on the way. I also, as long as I was doing an order, I also got the push button kill switch deal that hooks onto here, which I didn't even know existed until I started looking online. I always thought that this was for lights or something like that, but it actually is just a ground connector. And so there's a little push button switch that comes with this that you just push it against something and it'll shut the tractor off, which will be nice because the only way I've ever shut it off is just by turning the fuel off and letting it run out of fuel, and that's really not any fun at all. But then on the other side, it's just your standard breaker points and condenser setup. The internals of this, except for the coil here, the internals of this are all new. I had this worked on a few years ago, and you know, like I said, it worked really good. The only thing I can think of is that nut came loose and the spring got unwound, because everything in here is fine. That wouldn't stop it from snapping like it's supposed to, but it has to have that snap or it won't send the spark. And so when I get it all put back together, I'll probably check my points gap and stuff just to be sure. But then the rotor goes on like that, and then inside the cap you've got the two contact points right there and right there, and that's where the spark plug's hooked to, and then that has to rub against up here. But then every time that goes past those point, or those little brass deals inside of here, then it sends a spark down that wire. And so they're a fairly simple setup, and like I said, that when I couldn't turn it by hand and when it wasn't snapping, I knew that it wasn't anything wrong inside the Magneto here. I knew that it had to be somewhere in this impulse drive, because there's a big magnet in there, and other than that, there's nothing that could actually go wrong that would cause it not to snap. And so we'll see what happens. I can get a whole rebuild kit for this if I do need it. I'm hoping I don't. I'm hoping it's just the spring and that's it. But because the rebuild kit is a little bit more money than I'd like to spend. But we'll see what happens, and hopefully that's all that needs to be fixed. As far as the rest of the tractor goes, I'm pretty positive that I've got my oil line situation figured out, and I know I'm no longer going to have problems with the oil line. I also ordered a bushing for the steering shaft, because the steering shaft was really floppy up in the pedestal here. So that bushing will go in here, and then the steering shaft won't be so floppy. What else have I done? I added a bunch of bushings and stuff like that to the clutch linkage. It's still pretty floppy because as you can see right there, the internals are worn pretty good. And so I may have to take that apart someday and put bushings in it. I should have put a washer right here because this still has some play side to side, but it's a heck of a lot better than it was. I also greased this up because this was really tight, and it should move tight because of the spring, but it shouldn't be like stuck tight. And so that's a ton better. And then when I put all this throttle linkage back together, I greased it all up, so that hopefully won't wear quite as bad. But other than that, she's pretty much back together. I do still have to get the full-size gas tank on it. I don't know how soon that's going to happen, but I'd like to do that at some point. It's been on my to-do list for 4 years, and I just really haven't gotten to it. But I also got a few new gaskets for the carburetor, and so I'll get those put in. And then I got the gasket for the oil pump because I tried to do it without the gasket, and actually you can see one of the gears here. Hopefully you can see it. This camera don't work overly well in the dark, but there's two gears just like that. There's the other one, and they run together, and that's how the oil pump works. And then this cover right here goes up on top of them, and basically without the gasket, the cover is too tight on the gears, and it locked the oil pump up. So I got the gasket for that. I got myself a new oil filter. I had to get a new bearing for inside the steering housing up front because the rollers were falling out of one of them. And so just a few little odds and ends. I'm waiting on some parts to come in at John Deere. And then I got to try and clean more of the sludge out of the bottom of this crankcase. I don't know how it got so bad in there, but it is just full of sludge in there. And so I don't know, I might try and get like a pump sprayer and maybe some diesel fuel, and I might try and just spray some diesel fuel in there and let it run out, and that'll probably help a little bit. I'm not sure that'll entirely do what I want it to, but if it helps a little bit, it's better than nothing. And so once that's done, then I can refill her back up with oil and get the oil pump, everything done. And then I ordered the parts for the Magneto today, so I'd hope by sometime next week they're in, and we should be driving this thing by the end of next week, hopefully, if all goes well. And so one thing that I'm still not sure about is a year ago or whatever, last time this tractor was running, there seemed to be some water getting in the oil, and I don't know if that was just condensation or if I've got some water leaking somewhere in the engine into the oil. If there is, I've pretty much narrowed it down to the head gasket, I believe, unless the block is cracked or something like that, but I have a hard time believing the block is cracked. Because for one, I had an acid bath and everything, and they looked for that kind of stuff, and for two, it was bored out and everything, and so I have a tough time believing there's a crack in the block. It really hasn't run much since it's been rebuilt, and so if that could be the problem, but I really doubt it. Or like I said, I'm hoping it's just condensation. And so what we'll do is we'll get it running again, and I'm going to be running it more often, hopefully. I guess we'll see what happens with where we're ending up. I'm going to take it up there for sure, but I'd really like to find a plow. Taylor's family, they have a few older tractors, and they have plows for all of them, and every spring they go out and do a plowing thing. And so it'd be really fun to join them in that. But I'm looking for a 2-bottom plow for it, I guess. But I'd just like to just drive it around and use it around the yard, hopefully. It'd be really cool to find like a little mower of some sort to put on it, like a belly mower maybe, to mow the lawn with, or just something, you know, fun where I can still use it, but I'm not using it all the time because it is obviously a restored tractor. And so I don't want to beat the heck out of it, but it'd be fun to have a reason to use it. Yeah, so the only other thing I guess I'll mention is I've got a opportunity, it looks like, that's being presented to me. I've been having a heck of a time finding a job in the area that I'm going to move to, and I found a Craigslist ad a couple weeks ago for a place that's looking for a service technician at a dealership, and I won't say a name for now, but if I do get the job, then I'll let you guys know what's going on. But I went and met with the guys, and it looked pretty promising, and now I'm getting called back for a second interview, I guess, if you want to call it that. And so hopefully things go well there. I can't say it's my dream job, but it's definitely something that I'd be good at. You know, I've always enjoyed the mechanic side of things, and you know, hopefully there'd be room to move up and get into the precision side of things when the farm economy kind of turns around. But anyways, that's exciting news, and I think I told you guys in another video, but we have officially decided to rent a farm place for now. There's an old farmer that uses a machine shed and stuff, so I don't think we'll have room to put anything in there. But we do have a place to live, thank God, because the wedding is like 30 days away now, and I don't know what we'd do if we didn't have a place to live after we got married. But anyways, so that'll be good, and hopefully we're not there too long and we can get our own place, but we'll see what happens. Taylor's applying for a job on Monday, and so, you know, hopefully things go good with that too. But she's got a few part-time jobs right now, but it'd be nice for her to get into a full-time job with benefits and all that. But yeah, so life is good, and I'm just kind of killing time here now until the big day, and hopefully I'm not too busy. I'd really like to do some vlogging that day, and hopefully I'm not too busy to do that. But I'd really like to get the shop done here before I have to leave. If not, I guess I'll be coming home some weekends to help Dad with it. But yeah, so like I said, life is good, and hopefully I can get the tractor going because we need it for the wedding, and that's about all I got to say. So please leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.